recording. I've got it. We're good. All right. Everybody, thank you for your patience. Gabriella and I were actually just discussing our various levels of wanting to yawn earlier because we've both had very long weeks. So you'll forgive our lack of technical ability, certainly mine, in the moment. Thank you for joining us. And we are here tonight to learn a little bit about the very, very popular sport of procrastination. Now, for anyone in the room who is not a regular procrastinator, please identify yourselves because I think that you will be in the minority. What we want to talk about here, first of all, as usual, for anyone who is not with us in the session and is watching the replay, thank you for joining us. Thank you for taking the time to watch this. We are, of course, here as part of the Learn, Discuss and Practice series that Gabriella and I create as part of our Neurodevelopment Institute work. We're here to create awareness and evoke change. Tonight, we're looking at, as I said, the topic of procrastination. If you're not already following us, please do. And these will crop up again at the end. So you will have a chance then to do that as well. We're doing all of this really in the hopes of sharing, I guess, some ideas about the brain, enhancing people's knowledge, enhancing our own perspectives as well as we talk to very interesting people who join us on the sessions. And let's see what happens tonight, because we really only can set out some guidelines, but it's always such an amazing flourishing of ideas that we have here that it's great to be with you again. So Gabriella is going to treat us, first of all, to a little opener.
Yeah, so we talked about this topic, big topic of procrastination, and a Hungarian tale, or several Hungarian tales, or the morale of several Hungarian tales came up for me. Because normally in the Hungarian tales, what happens is that people have 3+1 chances. And one is the bonus. But whenever I have this feeling that I become aware that I might be procrastinating. So first time, I say, first, the excuse is acceptable. Second time, my excuse is acceptable, even though there are more questions to ask around. What is happening here? What is the reason that what I want to do, I'm not doing? Or what I should do, I'm not doing? But still, I would say, after the second awareness, I can accept certain reasoning. But when I find myself with a third, I find myself for the third time that I am postponing something, procrastinating, then I say, okay, so once it can happen, twice it can happen, 3 times, no. So this is not postponing, but this is procrastination. So get on with it, girl. So this is, yeah, go ahead, Deirdre.
Oh, I was going to ask if you had something that would contextualize that a little bit more for us. Is there an example that you can give that would help us to really get the meaning of that?
Yeah, so procrastination, it can be, for example, for me, it was also nowadays running. So, because I was an avid runner before, but for some reason I stopped running. And you think about, oh, okay, so I promised myself I would run 4 times a week. So the first time when I should have run, I said, oh, I'm very tired and it's not the right day to start, because when you are extremely tired, I know myself, and I was extremely mentally tired, so I didn't set out. And anyways, I have so many things to do and I put down the list that this is what I have to do. I can't possibly put aside the time. So that was number one. The second one, when I wanted to go out, then it was slippery. So I said, oh, I want to run. I have the time, but it's cold, and it's okay if it's cold. I have the gear, but it's slippery. And I remembered that once when I ran in the past, I really fall over in a huge way, which means that I hurt myself. I could hardly breathe. So I said, okay, it's slippery. I'm not going to run. And then the third time when I wanted to run, that's when I was like, oh, okay, so it is dark. So I can only run in the morning. It's dark. It's not safe. People are there. I don't feel fine running. So after a while, I said, oh, wait a second. So there is always something. So this was 1 week, right? So either I'm tired or slippery or dark and cool. So that was the moment when I said, okay, girl, you gotta get out. It's safe out there. It's not slippery. And yes, it feels that it takes away energy, but you remember that when you do it, after that, you are so much energized. There is a moment when you become energized. And this is when it's about awareness. Also, I think to be honest with yourself, really, and just have this rule of the threes. Don't go for the bonus. That's too much, I think. 3 is enough.
Would you like me to move on?
Yes.
Okay.
So, ladies, what is procrastination? And I started off by looking it up in the dictionary. And but I had also a question. What's the difference between postponing something and procrastinating, right? So what's the difference there? Why do we use these two different terms? And then I said, oh, one starts with a procrastinate. The other one is postponement. So it means forward. Post means after. So what I found in the dictionary, and I start with postpone something, it's arrange for an event to take place at a later time or date than originally planned. Pretty neutral. It sounds very neutral. And I looked it up, the origin, post after, ponere, the Latin word, to place. So place something after. And then I went to procrastinate. So now comes the interesting part. So in the Oxford Dictionary, what they say, delay something, neutral up until now, and now comes the interesting, exciting part, that you should do. So to delay something that you should do, or you think you should do, I would add.
Let's really emphasize should.
Yes, should, and that's why I say that you should do. They say, I would add that you think you should do, or you expect that you should do. And usually because you don't want to do it. So delay something that you should do, usually because you don't want to do it. Now, forward, procrastinus, belonging to tomorrow. Procrastinare, deferred till the morning. Sleepless nights. So you can see that procrastinate has a lot of energy, emotional energy around it. And there is the expectation. There are a lot of things around this. Postponing something is very, very neutral, sounds neutral. And maybe if you have any thoughts that came up for you, what is procrastination? If you want to add something.
Yeah, there's a real sense of dragging one's heels about procrastination, isn't there? And I love, as you know, that you've brought in that word should, because I really think that expectation is so loaded into this as well. It's something that we should do. Now, whether we think we should do it or whether we feel that someone else thinks we should do it, that's almost, beside the point, because we are procrastinating because we don't want to for some reason. Whether that's, yeah, I mean, we'll go into what that
Yeah, we
could
will
be in a
go
while.
into details. What is the reason that we don't want to do it?
Yeah.
It has a negative connotation, doesn't it? Procrastination. And I think Gabriella, what the little technique to find out if you're postponing or procrastinating is very true, because you can always kid yourself that you're postponing something for a very good reason. And you don't like to think that you're a procrastinator or that you're procrastinating. But until it happens a couple of times, and if you're aware that it's happening time and time again, then, that's where you have to name it as it is, procrastination. But, we have an expression in English, which is procrastination is the thief of time. So, it's negative in its connotation, whereas postponing, we don't have an expression about postponing, I don't think, anyway. Maybe we do, but and it's polite, isn't it? You postpone a meeting or you postpone an appointment. You don't procrastinate a meeting, do you?
What about if you postpone indefinitely?
Well, that's where you have to just admit to yourself that it's no longer.
You're politely procrastinating.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we were always told as kids never to procrastinate, and I think it's something that we know deep down that we're doing. It's just that we have to be brave enough to admit it.
Yeah.
So here's the question for you ladies, for everybody. I have mine. When do we procrastinate as a team here? Let's put our intelligence together, tap into collective intelligence. When do we procrastinate?
Admin.
Oh.
Well, I procrastinate when things make me feel uncomfortable. Then I will get stuck in a cycle for a very long time. And then I will just give it up for a shorter time, maybe for like 2 months. I will say, okay, let's just not think about it. Then most of the time I go back, I find a solution, and then I go back to get out of that cycle. But I do procrastinate when I feel uncomfortable. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that you've brought that up, Seville, and I'll tell you why. Because one of the things that we do for sure is, and I know that I do this as well, if there is that difficult situation to be faced or difficult conversation to be had, we can postpone that indefinitely. We can procrastinate on that for sure. And the thing is that then creates a certain sort of stress response within us, because we know it's there, we know it's coming. And we can hold that stress to an extent that we make ourselves ill. It's like, that the guillotine is there, it's dangling over us. It has to be done. We know it has to be done. And yeah, I mean, so many people have just put things off for even decades and wondered why they have stresses or they have aches or they have, something, they're not sleeping, whatever it is. But this can be one of the reasons that we're just embodying all of that.
I know very well. I can relate very well.
Mhm. I think something that I often feel is that I procrastinate for things that, rightly or wrongly, I feel I'm not capable or not good enough, or the result's not going to be, I'm going to be embarrassed about the result, or I'm not going to like the result. So I find other things to do instead. So it's basically protecting my ego by procrastinating. I'm not facing up to reality. I'd rather just not do it, and then there's no, I won't be witness to my failure.
Daphne, there is a wonderful TED talk by a guy called Nick Vosge, and he goes into, it very humorously goes into what you've just described. I would recommend it if you have 15
All
minutes to
right.
spare sometime. So the guy's name is Nick, and it's spelled Voge, Vosge.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, and I just heard about, also it's a kind of self-protection, right?
Mm.
You can call it self-worth, self-protection. And I think it was Amy Edmondson who said impression management. I don't know
Oh,
if
I like
this,
that.
Wow.
yeah, impression management. Generally, she says it for like externally, that you want to manage your impression. But I think it's also important. You use the word ego, Daphne, but it's also an impression of myself, how I see myself and how I will see. So do I see myself as an interesting storyteller, and it turns out that I'm just a mediocre storyteller? You know what I mean? Yeah. And
Yeah.
also it's interesting, the when do we procrastinate. For me, what comes up as well, the length of time, because you touched on that. We can do it for decades, or we can do it short term, or you can do it what Seville does. You realize, oh, I have been procrastinating, go away. What happens there, Seville, when you are going away, and then you come back, and then you tackle the issue? But I heard this phrase and I really liked it. When it's a long-term procrastination, you become a spectator of your life. This is the problem with it.
Mm.
And
you are not only a spectator, but you not a victim, but you let things happen to you because you're not in control. I'm thinking of much more serious situations, like being in debt and not paying off your debt. And it gets to such a stage where you just absolutely can't pay off your debt, and then that triggers off a whole lot of other problems. I mean, I
Yeah.
think the sort of procrastination I'm talking about is, I won't do my piano practice because, I'm never going to get it right anyway. That's like, it's so trivial. But people can procrastinate with health, of course, but also, a very tragic things that might happen to them if they don't take action. So there's kind of different levels of
Yeah.
of damage
But
that can
if we
happen.
look at those two examples, Daphne, that you've just given, and we think about, okay, so the piano, I'm never going to get it right. That's a preservation of self-worth in a way. And that's the term that Nick Vosge uses, preservation of self-worth. The facing debt is also preservation of self-worth in a way, because we don't want to face the poor decisions that we've made. And both those things, that if our if if we don't have that sense of self-worth, and we have to face our inadequacies, what is it that we feel when we're looking at those? I mean, it may be a range of unpleasant things, and shame and guilt are probably way up there on that list. Shame, guilt, inadequacy, all of these things that we'd rather not feel. And this is, you know, again, this I think we're probably on to the next question almost at this point, aren't we?
Yeah.
Why do we procrastinate? To avoid doing something that we don't want to do, or something that we don't want to experience?
Yeah, it's there are these patterns, right? So because Daphne, you mentioned the, you know, the ability. Do I have the ability? Or when I said, and this is about the preservation of self-worth. So I have this, I imagine I can do it, and I want to stay in that imagination rather than testing it out. And also you mentioned, Deirdre, administration. So I would imagine that's about boredom, the unpleasant feeling of boredom, right? I don't like to be bored, and I don't want to get there. So there is this, and Seville, that was maybe what you mentioned as well, you know, this unpleasant feeling maybe coming up, and I don't want to face the unpleasant feeling. So this is the ability, the self-worth with ability, the unpleasant feeling, being bored. Yeah, what else?
It's also the futility of doing certain things. They're talking about admin, you know, certain admin chores are important to do because, you know, you might have to write a bill, so that's very important, you know. But if it's filling in a dossier or filling in a, you know, what you seem as a useless document, but that you're obliged to do, you know, I will hum and ha and moan and groan about having to do that because I can't see the point. And why have I got to waste my time doing that when I could be doing something else, like finding a new customer? You know, people don't understand my business. You know, you sort of put on the victim mode, don't you? And you say, nobody, I mean, these technocrats, why do they make me do all this stuff? You know, so you're blaming somebody else.
Maybe
Yeah.
this is a good point to throw in that what we started talking about earlier, Gabriella. I don't know if anyone here has heard us talking about the Goldilocks curve. It's something we refer to quite a lot. And it's a kind of a metaphoric description of our brain's sweet spot for neurotransmitters. You know, it's got a nice kind of chemical cocktail going on. And when we're in, this was it Amy Arnston, I think, was the scientist who used this term first. But the idea is that when we have the right kind of cocktail of neurotransmitters, just enough feel good ones, just enough motivational stress ones, then we're in a sweet spot and everything is great. When we get to overstimulation, which we tend to refer to as stress or overwhelm, or understimulation, where we get boredom and, you know, just not enough to keep us interested, then what we need to think about is, are we procrastinating to avoid either of those states, the overstimulation or the understimulation?
Mm.
Yeah, if you think about the, you know, if something is overwhelming, so there is this big goal, you know, I don't know, going back to running, I want to run a marathon one day, and this is a big take, you know, and it's overwhelming. So how can you deal with this overwhelm so that you start doing it is really breaking it down, because breaking it to smaller steps to help your brain, because the brain doesn't like this overwhelm.
But of course, that is assuming that we can apply that logic to this thing. Still, We have another great talk that that Gabriella brought up when we were doing the prep for this is Tim Urban's talk on procrastination. Inside the Mind of a Master Procrastinator is, I think, the title for that one. And he also talks about, you know, this idea that we know that we can make it easier for ourselves by doing things in this gradual way. We can build up to something, but quite often we don't. We put it off until the last minute. And my mom actually has a fridge magnet on her fridge, which is the place for those things, I suppose. And it says, if it wasn't for the last minute, nothing would get done.
And if you think about it, you know, I think it's, yeah, Monet has in the Orangerie in Paris, he has this painting of the garden, and it's such an interesting thing. It's a beautiful painting. So if you ever come to Paris, you have to see that painting. But there is one thing, he had been working on that painting for years before his death, and he never finished the painting. When you go there, you see a finished painting, but you can never find his signature because he never finished the painting. He died in that way, that he never finished. So it's also very interesting that there is this perfection, and artists, I can see this with artists who always try to get to perfection.
Any other thoughts on why we procrastinate? Has anybody found another reason why we might procrastinate? Or do they all simply boil down to things that we don't want to do or things that we want to avoid?
It's about energy, right? So if you think about it, we want to preserve energy. This is, our brain tries to keep us alive, and this is what we want. It's all about energy, save.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, this is it. You know, this is a strategy that works. Only, you know, we live in a world where we create comparisons with other people, where we see progress as linear in many instances, where we are always trying to, I guess, make progress in the sense that we know it in our society. And just this moment, the phrase, don't just do something, sit there, has come to my mind, which is a play on the kind of way that we typically say that, you know, don't just sit there, do something. The idea is that, you know, we're really prompted to take action on things. If we're not doing something, we have this, again, these very deeply rooted things about our value being tied up in our productivity. And if we are not doing something, then we are maybe not as valuable, and therefore subject to potential rejection. So this is actually going a little bit off piste of where we were talking about earlier, but I do think this might be a very important point when we're talking about this. You know, the benefits, and Gabriella just really kind of nailed that there, this idea about it is all about energy. How much energy do we really need to expend in order to survive? Is doing, I don't know, the dusting, for instance, is that actually going to help us? Is it going to improve our lives in any way? So if we are not interested in that, and we'll come to this in a minute, then we can quite easily find ways and reasons to put it off, to avoid doing it. And that conserves our energy. And as we know, the brain is an energy hungry little beastie, and it uses about 20% of our metabolic expenditure per day. And it kind of likes to rest. It doesn't really like to overdo it unless it's interested in what it's doing. So the benefits of procrastination are actually quite a few. We can, as Daphne pointed out, and as we've kind of gone into, we can preserve our self-worth. We can avoid running into situations where we feel like we've let ourselves down. We've let that impression management go. We have failed in some way. If we don't do it, we can't fail it. Okay, so there's that. There's just the idea that we can spend our time doing other things. You know, we can actually do things that we enjoy more. There's always the opportunity that, or the chance, it's an outside chance maybe, and quite remote at some points, but we have this almost magical thinking about this as well sometimes, that if we put it off for long enough, maybe the problem will go away. Maybe the task will go away. Maybe somebody else will do it. Maybe there'll be some fairy godmother who will just whoosh it all away and we won't have to think about it anymore. And guess what? We will also have saved the energy. So bonus, win-win, right? So if sometimes, you know, this idea that if we just wait long enough, we won't have to. And that can actually happen. That does happen sometimes. So there, I mean, I know this isn't strictly, you know, this is not scientific in any way, but we do sometimes have this kind of little leaning into things that maybe happened once, you know, yeah, say you found £10 or euros or whatever on the ground in a certain spot. You can pretty much guarantee that you'll remember that and you'll probably still look for, you know, something on the ground in that spot. Okay, just because that's like a really nice thing to have happened. And maybe at some point you were facing something that you didn't want to do, like an exam, and then it got cancelled for some reason. Yeah, or you know, there was a here in Northern Ireland, it was likely to have been a bomb scare or something. You know, everything was cancelled that day. COVID happened, school happened, whatever it was, you didn't have to do it. So in that instance, again, the energy that you didn't put into it has also been saved. Energy conservation. It's a weird way of looking at it, but it is one that we should probably consider. So we've talked about the self-worth, we've talked about the energy conservation, we've talked about the fact that, you know, we have this little bit of magical thinking and we might not ever have to do it. So all of those things.
And also the fun instead of boredom or unpleasant feeling.
Yeah, the avoidance and hoping that it'll just go away. So yeah, any other benefits to procrastination?
I don't have more.
Could it be that putting it off until we are really motivated by the deadline actually makes us do it in a condensed time frame?
Yeah, well, I think it's going back to my theory of the handbag, which is, you know, this, if you've got a big handbag, huge handbag, you're going to fill it up with stuff, aren't you? If you've got a small handbag, you're just going to take what you need, you know. So it's the same with, as you said, the time that you've got to do things. If you know you have, for example, if you're doing a thesis, you know you have 5 years to do the thesis. But I can guarantee that most people do the thesis in the last 6 months of those 5 years. They may pretend, well, tell themselves that they're doing research for 4.5 years, and and then for 6 months, you know, they'll get down to writing it. So, yeah, I mean, maybe procrastination is a way of preserving, well, again, it's to do with energy, but, getting the adrenaline going and saying, okay, well, you've only got 2 days to do this, so now you can't procrastinate anymore. And then you find the energy, you find the adrenaline kicks in, and you get on with it. But if I mean, some people like to work under those conditions, other people don't. But maybe it's also a question of personal preference.
Yeah.
I know, I don't like working last minute because I get panicky and then I paralyze and then I don't do anything.
Be
It's
overwhelmed.
Can I come just in here, because it's very interesting. I was thinking about this, the different ways, and is it about neurotransmitters in the brain? So some people would need this last minute, which is maybe not the very last minute, because there is a sensible last minute and there is
Yes.
a minute, right?
Yeah.
So I would say
The second last minute.
yeah, so kind of the -1 when you can still do it somehow, but
Yeah.
there are, and it's very interesting what you're saying, because for some people that would lead an overstimulation to panic, right? Whilst, for example, for me, I have this sensible procrastination or kind of sensible lateness starting. So I need that pressure. Otherwise, I am the person who would do the research for 4.5 years and then down for 6 months. Yeah, I can see myself doing that. But definitely there is a moment when you are late. So how do you know the sense of, and there are people, for example, who need this kind of stimulation for their brain, and there are people like what you just said, that maybe that means the panic. So it's inactivity.
Yeah.
And again, this is self-awareness, isn't it? This is knowing, right, okay, maybe this is something that I don't want to do, but I'm going to have to do it. And what resources do I need to make available to myself in order to complete that adequately and comfortably? Then we have a choice at that point, don't we? It's not like we can really say, oh, we don't, we don't have the information to make that choice as informed individuals when we've gone through that sort of assessment. But I suppose it always helps to give it that little moment of thought and that bit of reflection as well. Here, I want to just introduce a couple of concepts. We have already talked just now about overstimulation and also maybe understimulation, in terms of how and why we procrastinate. But a couple of other things, immersion and engagement, the idea that we are actually interested in what we're doing. Are we as likely or less likely to procrastinate when we are interested in the things that we're doing? So this is interesting. I mean, obviously, things we enjoy doing, we want to do more of, right? But how about when these things that we enjoy doing become entangled with this idea of preserving self-worth? For instance, the thesis. I mean, presumably, if you are writing a thesis, it is because you have chosen a subject that you want to study. Unless, of course, you're one of these people who just decided to do a course because, you thought it might be, I don't know, a status symbol or something. But assuming that you are studying something and researching something that you are interested in, then is that is the preservation of self-worth, the idea that you might not produce the level of work that you want to, does that get overridden by your interest or not? There will be other examples, no doubt, of this little dance that you can think of. And there's another point here as well. There are things, I was just reading yet another thing today about the idea that, again, that sense of self-image, self-worth it can really have an impact, and a detrimental one, on how we engage with things that we previously enjoyed. And the example of teenage girls in sport was the one that came up, and how many girls drop out of sport at a certain age because of body image issues and things like that. So here we get to this next term, psychological safety. So we had engagement and enjoyment. Then we had this idea of the self-worth, and are we feeling psychologically safe about something? Can we go and do it, and not feel like we're being judged, or that we're otherwise going to be unsafe or feel like we're unsafe in some way? So these are all interesting ideas to apply to our own procrastination as well. So, for instance, if we're avoiding a conversation, is that because we are feeling psychologically unsafe in that arena? What are we putting off there? If we're putting off something that we would otherwise typically be engaged in, what's going on? Is there something, should we be listening more to our body? And in terms of the running, for instance, if you are in good health and so on, is there something else going on that we may not be fully aware of? But I mean, I'm a great one for kind of thinking about stuff in terms of, okay, today is not the day for this. What's tomorrow going to be like? And sometimes that works, but I think this is a great place to draw in your 3 times, Gabriella. How long have I been putting it off for? Is this something that I really need to check in with? Physically, is there any reason why I should be putting this off? And if not, then okay, let's get out and do it. If there's some niggle that, I've been too busy to notice, it's a great way to identify as well if that is something that we need to dig into.
I have a question around this is, where would we put value clash? So I'm going to give you an example. There is a difficult conversation, okay? So I am not worried about self-worth. I am not worried about the unpleasant feeling, but my value is connection, human connection. And what I see with this difficult conversation, that I'm going against my value of creating real deep human connections and not hurting people. And I'm just trying, just to procrastinate because I have this feeling I haven't found the right way of doing that. Is that procrastination?
Well, here, that's a really interesting question. And again, let's look at it 2 ways. So perhaps it is, in a way, a preservation of self-worth, because our values and our worth are kind of tied up together as well, aren't they? So I don't want to be seen as the bad guy. I don't want to be seen as the person who says the thing, because that changes how I see myself. Yeah. But
yeah, go on.
also, what if it is that we're putting it off until we find that way? What if we are kind of, there's a little low-level hum somewhere in the background that we are actually thinking about this, that we've handed it over to the room full of wizards, and we're waiting for the inspiration to hit us on how to do it. And that, I think, that will actually, I'm going to skip forward one because that ties into this idea of pregnant procrastination as well. What do you think of that? Is that a fair kind of approach, or disentangling?
So for me, yeah,
sorry.
Go ahead, Daphne.
It's just as I said before, this negative connotation that I have with the word procrastination. And if mulling something over because you want to find, the right words, or you want to find you want to sort things out in your own head before you start saying something. I'm a bit uncomfortable with the word procrastination, because for me, that's like, it doesn't go with the process in action. I find that I'm thinking about things a lot, and when I was younger, I was a very spontaneous kind of person and would blurt out things and, you know, not really think things over, and obviously got myself into, you know, well, not conflicts, but misunderstandings, and people getting upset because of what I said. And now I tend to do the opposite. I think, well, rather than blurting out what I really want to say to that person, I'm going to go away and think about what that means. Also, because I've done a little bit of reading and self-development, what is happening inside of me before I actually start, you know, shouting at somebody. So for me, I don't call that procrastination, because, as I said before, procrastination is something that I think is negative. So
And this is fascinating, Daphne, if I might just throw something in here, because, you know, what you used that word there, mulling it over. And Gabriella, at the earlier stage of this, you talked about the definition coming from to delay until tomorrow. And we also have, you know, this very, well, to my mind anyway, very positive kind of sentiment of sleeping on something, which is to put it off until tomorrow. I mean, that's like the good face of procrastination, isn't it? So it's really interesting, you know, how much charge this word carries. It's almost like lazy. There's maybe an association with that there, isn't there? And again, value of our productivity.
I know where that comes from in my background, because it was something that was definitely reprimanded. And I mean, I was brought up in a Protestant family, and there the value was, well, you do, you know, the work, you do the hard work, you do the bits that you don't want to do, and then if there's time left, you can enjoy yourself. And so that was something that was really instilled in me. So that's where I suppose I'm insisting on this idea that procrastination is something that, you know, it's something that I don't feel, well, I feel that I shouldn't be procrastinating, because I've been told so many times that it's wrong to procrastinate.
And here we hit the expectations.
It's quite interesting, because I'm just thinking about this expectation. And what comes up for me, you know, when we think about physical activity, you have to do it. You have to feed the animals. You have to do it. You know, in agricultural societies, you had to do things. Otherwise, you know, the animals were hungry. They didn't breed. They didn't produce. They didn't, I mean, you had to also care for the plants. If you didn't do that, you could lose the harvest. And I'm just thinking that now, with the mental activities, that because we use our heads much more than our body, you know, physical activity, is it the same? Or, you know, when you sit down, you look lazy, you look you seem to be procrastinating, or maybe you are sleeping on it, or you are putting it on the back burner, because you know that for creativities you need the space. So how does that change the understanding of this word, when, you know, procrastinare is about, you know, you actually kind of defer it until tomorrow morning, so you sleep on it. Yeah.
I'll cover off this slide here, which kind of ties into some of this thing. And this is a term that I use, because I know that sometimes if I'm writing something, because I come from a creative background, I'm, I guess, quite comfortable with the idea that there is a lull and that I will let things settle, and not think about things, and then something emerges. So this idea that, you know, we've given the instruction to the room full of wizards, and then at some point they will emerge with an answer out of there. But I also thought it was quite interesting, you know, that this a lot of the time is associated with ideas. This pregnant procrastination is about waiting for an idea to come. And certainly in creative work, you know, that is something that we can lay the groundwork for. And then we have to sometimes take the foot off the gas as well a little bit. But it's a gestational thing. And I think it's interesting that we do talk about, you know, ideas as a brainchild as well. So just the next thing, of course, is that we have got, sorry, I'm just wondering if that's showing up there. We've got procrastination or progress, and this ties back to self-worth, but also in a slightly different way. You know, how do we value ourselves? How do we value our time and our potential? And procrastination can be a real stumbling block to fulfilling real potential. So this, I suppose, is the question that we have to ask ourselves. Maybe if we find ourselves procrastinating, we can ask if this is really, you know, is this something that gives us the self-respect that we deserve? Is this something that gives us the self-worth that we deserve, or is it just loading on the shame and the expectations and the guilt and all the rest of it? And is it actually holding up the things that we can bring to the world? So one of the things, and I'm not sure if we had this conversation earlier, Gabriella, but this came up at some point today anyway. This idea about the potential that we have, the self-worth that we want to preserve, and the people that we can help, that we can serve. And quite often, if we are stalling on something because we don't want to fail, we don't want to be seen as inadequate, or, you know, get it wrong or be criticized in some way, when we tap into empathy, then we see the people that we can help, that we see the people that we can serve. And that is, it's quite a powerful way of unlocking our procrastination manacles. Has anyone experienced that idea, you know, that you were hesitating with something, that you were putting it off for some reason, and then somebody needed you to help them? Has anyone ever experienced being able to get over their procrastination in that instance?
Not like that, but I've seized the opportunity to get over my procrastination if somebody has, a friend of mine has come to me and said, oh, I would really like to do such and such a thing, but, you know, and then I jump in and say, oh, right, yeah, me too. So let's get cracking. Let's do it together. You know, so if you have the kind of the support system to do it, you might get over your procrastination. You might seize that opportunity because somebody else is reaching out to you.
Yeah.
But no, I don't think I've ever been in the situation that you're describing, Deirdre, as such.
Well, I've definitely seen it with people who want to, you know, or who are trying to, for instance, build a business that helps other people, and they will be very reticent about putting themselves out there until they picture that person that they can help, or they recognize that if they don't do this, then they are not going to be able to help the people that they want to help. Now, there's one other thing that just popped into my mind as you were talking there, Daphne, and now it's gone, but it'll come back, I'm sure. This train of thought has left the station. So yeah, that yeah, here it is. And this is something, when I first heard this, I had to sit down. You said there, Daphne, about when somebody else is trying to do something, you'll get in and you'll muck in and you'll support them and you'll do it together, right? And I find, and I know that this is probably not unique to me, I'm sure a lot of people are like this, that if we have, we've made a commitment to someone else to do something, we are very likely to fulfill that commitment. When we
Yeah.
have made a commitment to ourselves,
Yeah,
are we as committed to doing it?
true.
Why
Yeah, it's
not?
like making a promise. It's an it's a type of promise, isn't it? When you say, if
Yeah.
you say something out loud, then it's I think there's a term for that in linguistics. I think I remember learning that term, but when you say something out loud, like I promise to do something, it's more than just words. It's, something much more solemn. So
Sure.
if you say to somebody, yeah, I'm going to be doing this next week, and then or I'm going to get started, I don't know, doing my piano practice,
Mm.
and I know exactly the friend who's going to say to me, "Oh, Daphne, have you done your practice? Have you done your piano practice?" And so she'll be my accountability buddy, even though I haven't asked her to be.
Mm.
And this is probably unconsciously what I wanted. I wanted
Mm.
somebody to,
Yeah.
check up on me and prod me.
But here's the thing though, I mean, and this for me, I think is one of the really important things here. Why is a promise made to someone else something that we take more seriously than a promise that we make to ourselves? Why are we not worth the same consideration in our promise making and promise keeping than someone else?
Oh, I think that's another subject for an
It
evening
is, it's,
discussion, all on
but
its
they are all connected.
Promises.
own. No, I think that's very, very true. It comes down to self-worth too, doesn't it?
Exactly. Mm. So, yeah, this is, we've talked about him. Right. What are our favorite examples of procrastination? Tendencies, tactics, theories, traumatic outcomes.
Oh gosh. Don't we have them all?
I was just looking at something today, reading a passage out of a book, actually that Gabriella advised me to read, written by Stella Collins, and she talks about cues and actions and routines. And I think it just came up in the in discussing tonight, is that there are certain cues which we have which make us procrastinate. And if we can recognize those cues and say, okay, well, I want to override the action that I usually take, which is procrastinate. If I want to override that, I have to think of a different action to put in place when I get that cue. So the cue might be, oh shit, I've got to do those, that admin. I'll do it tomorrow, and that's your cue. And then if you're conscious of that and you say, okay, well, usually what I'd say is, okay, well, I'll do it tomorrow. I've got other things to do. And if you get into a different habit, which takes a while, then you override what you usually do by something different.
Mm.
That's just what came up and then you build in different routine, you see. So the procrastination is no longer procrastination, it's a habit which you've accepted.
Yeah. I think that's really important, Daphne. And it reminded me of something that I think I heard Bob Proctor saying at one point. And he said that people overestimate what they can do in a week or a month or a year, and they underestimate what they can do in a minute. And there's a thing called like the 3-minute rule or the 5-minute rule, meaning that if you can get this task done, completed in less than 5 minutes, say, then do it now. Don't put it off. And that reinforces our idea of ourselves as someone who does things, who gets things done. But if we constantly add the things to the to-do list, then that gets longer and longer and longer. But if we can just go right, tick done, that helps us to think of ourselves a little differently as well. I'm going to say hi to Marta because I think she is with us but came late. So it's nice to have you. You there? She maybe can't speak, maybe just listening at the moment. Anyway, any other examples, Gabriella or Seville, want to share?
So I mean, I can see this, the thesis when Daphne talked about it and when I saw the TED talk. So I was definitely not the person who started to write the thesis 3 days before the deadline. But I had this sensible lateness, and because when I have to, I think it's when I have to write a bigger piece, it can be a thesis, a report, or whatever. There are two things. One is the self-worth. I want to do it. I want to do the perfect thing. I think this came from there. And, I didn't want to face the reality that, this is not the perfect that I'm going to create here. And the other thing is the fact that I had to sit, and that I'm a person who always moves. And just the fact that I had to sit down, especially when I was younger, I'm better now, but it was painful for me. Sitting has always been painful for me. And these two things always took me. So my thesis, I remember my very last one, which was a master's degree thesis. And I just procrastinated. And then I said, oh, I can't do it. And it was my friends. I said, oh, I don't need this degree because this is my, I don't know, my second or third degree. And my friend said, you have to finish it. And I said, okay. So I sat down for a month, from morning till night. For 1 month, I was sitting at my table and I did it. But was it painful until the procrastination itself and the writing itself? But after that, it felt really good.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's that kind of completion, again, even with the little 1-minute tasks or the huge task, the completion itself is a reward.
And I don't know about you guys, but whenever I had to go to an exam, this is when you have to study. So you think about the exam, I have to study. But that's the moment when you say, oh, I have to clean the room. It's really, really dirty. Oh my God, the curtain, look at the curtain. You see everything. Oh, there had been books on your shelf for years. And then you say, oh, I would love to read that. That looks really interesting. And now I have to read my school book. Isn't that interesting?
And don't forget procrastination, when you absolutely have to make things.
Oh, God. Yeah. So it's
yeah, it's actually, again, this is one of the things I used to have to write a lot of tender documents, and I absolutely hated them. Oh dear God, they drove me around the twist. And that was the time when my desk got tidied, for sure. I mean, I would rather file than write, do the admin than write the tender documents. So it's all relative, really, isn't it?
But what Yeah,
just one thing that I procrastinate a lot with. You're talking about dusting and cleaning. My technique is to invite somebody to my house so that I do the cleaning.
You got to have someone in every 2 weeks at least. You
Yeah.
need a visitor.
Because otherwise, or when my family is coming for the weekend, I say, oh, I just can't leave the bedroom in that state. I've got to, tidy it up a bit.
Here, I think
And
we have
then
a
I
top
will
10
do
tips
it.
here.
But, so if I invite you to my house, it's because I want to clean my house, not because I want to see you. Otherwise,
Yep.
I live like I live in a porcherie, as they say in French. No, that's not exactly true.
But I know what you mean. I do know exactly what you mean. It'll always be cleaner when there are people coming. Again, this idea that we'll do it for other people, but we won't necessarily do it for ourselves.
Yeah.
So I am wondering, yeah, from tonight, what has been, as usual, these three questions, what's been most surprising tonight? What do you think has been most useful? And what are you still curious about? And what will you be procrastinating on tomorrow?
I think for me, it has been the most surprising part was that I learned that I might do it to save energy. I mean, I knew that, but I just forgot that, okay, there must be a reason for that. Except you running away from unpleasant emotions or unpleasant events. And then the most useful thing was, well, I mean, the whole discussion was pretty useful. It was a really good review, and it was a really good reminder for me to not to do it anymore. And I am still curious about that, how we can overcome it. I think I still need to go and read about it or find out what I can do about it. Probably, yeah.
Well, I think, just in terms of what we can do about it, being aware of the why we do it, and then asking ourselves if that's really how we want to continue. That certainly to me is one of the primary ways of getting, stopping it. We won't always succeed in that, but awareness creates choice effectively.
I would add to this, because awareness is really important, and then the choice. And also, I mean, if I continue this, what will I become, or who will I become? Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we can always ask the question about, values here. What value am I upholding if I continue to procrastinate? What value am I not upholding if I continue to procrastinate? What value will I be upholding if I stop my procrastination? And is there a value that I will not be upholding if I stop my procrastination?
Brings clarity for sure, and a better choice.
Mm. How about you, Daphne? Have you been surprised by anything tonight?
Well, I think you know what I'm surprised about. Pregnant procrastination. Yeah. Yeah, but it's alliteration. Both words begin with a P. So yeah, that's the most surprising. I think what's been most useful is, all um, the reasons why we procrastinate. The self-worth, the energy, the values that we hold. I think that's been most useful to clarify all that. I mean, I think I hadn't really thought about the self-worth thing, but yeah, I mean, I mentioned it myself a little bit, but that's clearer now in my mind. And what are you still curious about? Well, I think human nature, and what makes us tick and what makes us not tick. I think just people and reactions are fascinating. How there's 4 of us here, all with unique people and our own perceptions of what procrastination is and how we go about it. So yeah, still curious about, I mean, something that you can be curious about all your life, isn't it? Human beings and their brains.
Yeah, the ultimate rabbit hole.
But yes, that was the neurotransmitters. That was interesting too, Deirdre, what you said. Not too much of one and too much of the other.
Yeah.
Thank you. Very fun discussion as usual.
Very, very welcome, Daphne. I mean, what I find fascinating about this is how many of these things all play into each other, because we've talked about things like neurotransmitters and separate discussions about overstimulation and understimulation and so on. But then we come to this as like a knock-on effect of one or other of those states. And we want to try and avoid that. We've talked about avoiding unpleasant feelings, but these all they all kind of weave together in this conversation and in many others, no doubt. But tonight we seem to have been pulling a lot of threads together as well.
Yeah.
And just a question, seeing Seville's dog or a dog with Seville, do dogs and do animals procrastinate?
Oh, that's a great question.
I don't
Well,
have the feeling, or birds.
do you think a cat would procrastinate going to the vet if it could? They do tend to try and shy away from those kind of experiences, or ones that don't like bath time, for instance, a dog that doesn't like a bath or a shower.
Sure.
So I guess time perception is also something that would play in here, wouldn't it? If we have an idea of, time in the future. That's actually something I should have mentioned earlier, by the way. This idea that we will take a smaller reward now, i.e., relaxing, not doing the thing, versus a bigger reward in the future, which would be completing the thesis or getting a great result or whatever, building the business. So that's another thing that, these are just things that we have to weigh up in our own decision making. And procrastination is a decision, by the way. So we decide to procrastinate or we decide not to.
It's a choice for sure.
And I think actually I'm going to go back out of this slide because we do not have the next event up as yet, both having procrastinated on this issue because we have been a little bit overstimulated with work recently. So we don't have the next one up yet, but we will get it up very, very soon. And yeah, I mean, I think that's sort of the main thrust of what we wanted to cover tonight. If there's anyone who wants to reflect on anything, or if anything else has popped up for you, if there was an interesting feeling or sensation that you noticed as we had this discussion, it would be great if you felt like sharing that.
it just comes up to me. I shared a video with Deirdre that I watched, Seville, because you said, what is the solution? How can we avoid procrastination? And I said, I saw a Huberman video, and he explains that how can you avoid procrastination. I'm not going into details now, but just to tell you, if you feel you want to procrastinate, the best thing to do is to have something very unpleasant and safe. And one of his choices was having a cold shower, because that also sorts out your dopamine level long term. So I'm not sure this is very helpful. And we think about cold showers when we procrastinate, but I'm happy to share that video. It's funny.
There we go. Yeah, I mean, I as someone who puts the pro in procrastination, getting in a cold shower is not going to happen for me. I will definitely procrastinate on that. So there we go. Ladies, thank you so much for your time and participation. It is an absolute pleasure to have your contributions. Really privileged to have people who will come and join these discussions with us. So thank you so much for taking the time. And I really hope that you've enjoyed it as much as we have. And I'm so glad we didn't postpone or procrastinate, Gabriella. And yeah.
Yes. Who's going to admit to thinking, oh, maybe I won't go to the maybe I won't connect tonight? Who's going to admit to that?
I'm going to admit that when it came to about 7:03, I was experiencing some relief, because I was saying, oh, maybe no one's going to come tonight, and then we can put it off.
Yes. Yeah. Well,
we were both yawning at that stage, but you know what? This is maybe this is the equivalent of a cold shower for the brain, because I feel great now. So
yeah.
Thank you all for that.
It's the antidote. It's the antidote. Yeah.
Connection.
Yeah, well, I have a bit of a cold and I'm feeling a bit fluey. So I thought, oh, that would be a really good excuse just to say that I have to curl up in bed. And then I thought, no. I don't want to let myself down by chickening out. And I know how much hard work you girls put into this. So it's important for people to show up. And, because I think it's a wonderful gift you're giving us. So
thank
you don't want to say no to a gift.
Really appreciate that, Daphne. That's really kind. But you've actually touched on something really important there as well, and that is consistency and habit. Because one of the things that I have noticed over time, and I know that this has happened to me too in certain things, but I've seen it happening in our dojo, where you have people who have been coming consistently and who've been training consistently, or attending whatever, practicing whatever it is, running, it doesn't really matter. But it's when we let that consistency lapse and we put off the going back, and the longer we put it off, the easier it is to put it off, if you know what I mean. So yeah, I really appreciate that you didn't sit it out, but I do hope that your flu isn't too bad and that you'll recover quickly from it.
Well, I can tell you what I'm going to be doing right now. And that's a tisane, a herbal tea, and in my pajamas and under the duvet cover.
Fabulous. Sounds like
and
a
I
good way to
will
spend
not
it.
procrastinate. That will be something.
Because you're immersed in that idea. You're engaged with it.
Yeah. But certainly lovely to meet new people, and also to know we're not alone in terms of procrastination.
Yes. Procrastinators of the world, unite tomorrow.
Yeah. And I know at least 2 people who said, I want to see the replay because I'm super interested. I just can't make it tonight.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, good.
So
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of replays, I'm actually going to stop the recording now. So again, thank you everyone, and we will see you next time, I hope.
Yes, lovely. Good night.